While the systemic challenges we're facing increasingly concern more of us, not everyone gets to participate in the global agendas that steer, or hope to steer, our collective fate. Our guest today, Tatjana von Steiger, is one of the people who has had the privilege to sit at such tables. Throughout her 20-year career in diplomacy, she has served for the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, representing Switzerland in the executive boards of the main UN development agencies and the World Bank, where she developed partnerships and solutions to global challenges ranging from climate change, water and food security to health and migration. In 2014, Tatjana represented Switzerland in the negotiations surrounding the UN Sustainable Development Goals, more commonly known as the SDGs. Among her circles, and more recently as the head of policy outreach at Swiss Academy for Nature, Tatjana is appreciated as a thoughtful mediator, integrating very different points of view into solution-finding processes to the most pressing issues of our times. Together, we explore Tatjana's early life, including how her unlikely studies in Russian literature shaped the way she approaches her work. We listen to some of the challenges Tatjana encountered as a rather shy woman learning to play the diplomacy game. We also talk about her experience navigating the high-stakes negotiations of the SDGs. And finally, despite the sobering reality that only 15% of the UN-defined goals are on track, we listen to what gives Tatjana hope.
Having this group of individuals together, having grown to a collective, but then also being challenged by us in working on some of the challenges that we as the Swiss Academy see and work on in northern Kenya with other partners, and then seeing the solutions they came up with. That's where I draw from my hope and also in the end, and again, some optimism.
While the severity of our poly-crisis should not be bypassed, while we should be careful with terms like hope and their potential confusion with naive optimism, I do hope you find in this episode some company to keep doing work that is meaningful, not because it will magically save the entire planet, simply and more virtuously because it's the right thing to do. I'm Carlota Guedes, and this is the Waking Youth Podcast. I like to start by grounding things in a bit of personal history. And I was digging a bit and I discovered some things. I discover that you said this, that you're part of a spoiled minority, privileged minority, that you grew up in Bern, the capital of Switzerland, a space and a city you described as green and healthy, which you don't seem to take this for granted today, although at the time it was a given, right? I would like to start, Tatjana, also because of, having in mind the work that you do now, to explore these roots, and how would you begin to describe your relationship to nature in your childhood? Do you recall any moments, any memories that come of you and nature in your childhood?
Absolutely. So thank you, Carlota, for inviting me first, also for the interest in my personal story, my personal journey. For me, this is it's not a given, it's not granted. So thanks for that. You mentioned a quotation, and I don't exactly recall where you got that from. This is interesting that you found that. From me saying that I grew up in someone who was very privileged. Exactly because I grew up in a town, the capital of Switzerland, which in itself, it's a very small town compared to other capitals of this world. It's tiny. Mm-hmm. And the tininess, the advantage of it is that it is quite a green city. So we have a river that flows through the city. And along the river banks, it is very green. And as a child, when you grow up in a city which is the capital, you learn that quite soon, that this is the capital. But still, you have the privilege of just going out, playing outside with your friends, which I think is something, it's really a gift for children. It's a gift in terms of exploring the world, the nearest surroundings around them, playing outside, being part of the outside and basically being part of the environment, feeling secure as kids, as kids that want to explore the world and are not threatened, be it by traffic, be it by other risks that are out there. So I could explore the nature around me, which was an urban nature, but still very green. And in that regard, when I think about my childhood, I was spending a lot of time outside playing soccer / football with other kids and just building things outside. I wasn't restricted to the garden, the little garden of the house I grew up in. I actually had this outside world, which was to which I had access with other kids. I remember walking along the river shores with my dog, and there also growing up during adolescence. Nature was a place I went to because I felt lonely. So there are a lot of memories linked to me being in nature, but not reflecting of whether I'm part of it or not. I was just there. So, and that, I think that's fantastic, as it gives you that safe space you need as a child to start little by little to extend your horizons.
And you mentioned something that you went to nature when you felt lonely. Was that something that happened often? Why did you mention that?
Yeah, as an adolescent, when you grow up and you try to figure out who you are, I think I wasn't the only one feeling like that. I, of course, had the feeling that I was the only one. I think that's part of it. And nature gave me that space and comforted me. It didn't, I wouldn't say it was healing, but it was just there. It was, when I think about children, and I had that with my own children, we spent a couple of years in New York. They did not have this privilege as I did. Given this lack of sense of security also by us as parents. So, and then also the culture that is built around that in a society. So these are all factors that, as a child, you're not conscious of what their impact is. But later on, especially when you then can compare it to children of today or your own children, you see the value of it.
Yeah, you said something in the lines of that this reality of the place that you were in, that brought an innocence, a naivety about how you navigate life in terms of feeling secure. And I know this is something you said somewhere that you probably don't remember where exactly, like you said. But, for me, this says so much when I look forward in your life into the work that you would be doing. What does this mean to you, this sense of innocence and naivete that you had initially navigating life? What were you referring to? Do you know?
Yes, I think I know. And that's again linked to what I was saying when I said I'm a privileged child who grew up in this tiny capital of Switzerland. You know, when you're born, the color of your passport has no meaning to you. Only with getting older, and then also in using this document and realizing how either it closes doors before you or it opens doors before you. So, of course, then you start thinking about it. And there, it's like somehow winning in the lottery. I mean, I didn't do anything for me being born in the place I was born, and growing up in a place which is secure, growing up in a place where, yes, it's you can say what you want to say. So this and naivety and innocence is not, for me, this is nothing negative. I wish children and youth to be able to grow up like that. And I know that this is not the case for many.
Mm-hmm.
And I think acknowledging that this is something which let me also do things others might have had to fight for much more than I, then comes with a sense of responsibility.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about when you started waking up to all of these issues of security, human security, social impact, social well-being, environmental awareness as well. Do you recall having this awareness early on in your life? Where would you trace back the roots of these interests that are very, very clear also as soon as you leave university?
Of course, they're also already, the roots are in my childhood. The roots are in my family. When it comes to social differences, I grew up in a family with a mother that is originally from Germany and a father who was born in Switzerland, but basically, despite the fact that he was born with a Swiss passport, he grew up as a Russian immigrant. His parents had left Russia during the Russian Revolution back in the early 20th century. So, of course, this cultural mix in my own home, that created a sense of curiosity for what is out there, and probably also a certain openness for things that are not so familiar to me. So it was, I would say, quite a colorful mix of cultural influences that I experienced throughout my childhood. We had there was an interest always in politics in my family, and we had these discussions during our meals, be it lunchtime or dinner time. So this is something I was also confronted with early on. So it was something natural, this interest. I mean, I could also have said I'm not interested in it anymore because I'm seeking for distance to my parents. But that was the case with me. And then I grew up in the 70s and early 80s. And there in Switzerland, we had a big discussion about the dying trees. So there was this environmental movement and various environmental organizations that were founded in this time. And I remember very well that this was, for me, something very important. And I was also sensitive to this whole discussion and wanted that something is happening, and saw also a responsibility with politics. For me, this is the reason why I was then also later on interested in understanding better what are the causes and understanding better also where you can and how you can make a difference. One moment in life which was really detrimental for me in my growing personality was when I decided that I want to go abroad as an exchange student. So I was 16 and I left to the United States. It was in Northern California, so it wasn't warm at all. It was at the coast. And there, this is, I think, when if you want to find a time when I lost maybe my innocence and naivety, maybe this is where I lost it, but also in a positive way. This is where I met people from all around the world, which were in the same situation as I was. They experienced the same thing as I did, meaning that we all had come to that place and not really knowing the language. So we were all thrown back into our early childhood years where we had to learn to communicate verbally. And then we had to do that again at the age of 16/17. So that was this joint experience with friends from Argentina, Indonesia, Italy, Germany, really Jordan, experiencing more or less the same emotions while coming from very different cultural backgrounds and also realities. That was for me a wake-up moment, especially when we then had to depart and go back to our home countries, just knowing that my friend from Argentina, he didn't know whether he had to go to the army. And that at that time, yes, there was this war between Argentina and the United Kingdom. So this definitely marked my future path. As from that moment on, I can recall that every decision that was taken was a decision I took in terms, and where I also assumed the responsibility for what I did or I didn't do.
And I'm curious if that initial impulse to go abroad, because you're quite young, was that coming from you? Or was there someone that pushed you back then to go? I'm curious, because at least in Portugal, I know not everywhere in the world that's a common experience.
I was motivated by my brother, my older brother, who hadn't done that. He didn't have this. Yeah, he was somehow waking up a bit too late, that this is an opportunity to seize and at least to try it. It wasn't a given that I could go. And so I already knew at the age of 13, 14, that I want to do that. And then I was very determined, and I was just fighting for it. So he motivated me as he was telling me about a friend who was doing that. And I thought, I want to do that. So while he motivated me, I think it was something inside me that said, I just want to do it. And it was, I was also confronted by my parents, because that it costed them quite an amount of money. And they said, well, if you do that, then you then choose not to do something else.
Do you recall, because you said that also after that moment that you were much more or more in control of your life, in the decision-making process of your life. Do you recall who you wanted to be or become when you grew up?
Yeah, this was something, this idea of having to decide who I want to be and become, and actually even worse, who I might then have to be and stay being this person. That made me feel quite uncomfortable. I think I was one of my main drivers until today, but when I was younger, even much more, was curiosity. And the idea of learning a profession and then just being in that profession until you're retired was scaring me. And my first education or my first professional degree was a teacher's degree. When at the time, when I did it, I was very young. When I finished it, I was 21 years old. And this idea of working more than 40 years as a teacher was really scaring me. And I remember that I went to a coach, a counselor, just trying to figure out, what do I want to do in my life? And he did all this funny things with me. I just said, okay, you do whatever you want. And I didn't tell him anything, but it was interesting that through the different exercises, methodologies he applied, in the end, after 3 sessions, he said, you know what, I could tell you now what you should do, but in the end, don't be scared. It'll be fine. So I don't think I need to tell you what I think you should do. And for me, this was comforting. From that moment on, I then I had to work, of course, to also finance my studies at university, because I then, from Teachers College, I went to study Russian literature. And if you study something like that, Russian literature, the questions that are asked to you in Switzerland and have been asked to, and I guess still today, are what are you going to do with that? And the logical answer would probably be, I want to pursue an academic career. At least that then is something very, very specific and tangible. And I said, I don't know. I just want to learn. I want to dive into this culture of which I don't know the language, but I've heard it at home. So I'm curious to understand that culture better through using literature as an entry point. And I like to read, so that was fine. And I think that this links back to what I was saying, that I was privileged growing up in a very secure environment that allowed me also to have this sense of security that I'll figure out a way to earn my living without having to know it already beforehand and then really pursuing that career path.
I'm curious, without spending too much time on it, but the teaching. So the biggest reason why I didn't pursue that was because of the predictability of the future that would involve. Why did you decide to take another degree?
I always knew that at the time we had this possibility to get a teacher's degree, and still with the same diploma, you had all the doors open except to some subjects to pursue then studies at the university and get your master's degree. So I just seized the opportunity to go to Teachers College. And the great thing about that was that I then had a job I could also work in and gain some money while pursuing further studies. I don't regret that I got this teacher's degree, because many of the skills that are taught there, and then also working as a teacher, that I think gives you a good foundation also of understanding of navigating difficult situations, of trying to get kids that might not be interested in certain things to really learn and get them excited, get them interested. All these social competency skills you can develop and train there. They're very helpful for whatever you do. So it teaches you leadership skills. However, I was always more interested in the individuals and the people and the kids I was working with than in having to teach them and ensure that they learn some specific things. So for me, the human interaction was more interesting than ensuring that, yes, they then know the subjects well. So this was then also why I was moving away from teaching and just using these skills later on in still transmitting specific knowledge on specific issues to people that might not be so open to what you think they should be open to, or what you want them to also listen to. So that these skills, they helped me probably also in situations where I had to negotiate or I had to present something.
We'll get there. I'm very curious to explore that as well. Before that, I want to ask you, which is connected to what you were saying, how then, because not everyone that grows to become a diplomat had this interesting, intriguing background in Russian literature. How do you think, these studies and this field shape the way that you show up in your work and your life?
Thanks for this question. For me, this is a very important question, as I'm deeply convinced that studies like literature of any culture, it can also be music or arts, meaning studies which allow you to access and get a better understanding, just dive into a different way of thinking than the one you had been conditioned with. They are a fantastic foundation. If you then want to engage with people with different cultural backgrounds, which in the end is what you do when you enter diplomacy. So when I finally decided that I would try to enter the diplomatic career, I thought, oh my God, I mean, yes, I speak Russian and French, at the time not that well, French and English. So I master languages. I have, as I said, I have an understanding for different cultures. But I have never studied law, never studied economy, never studied history. All of that I had to learn. And I still remember when the exam was assessed and I had my individual assessment, the feedback I received from the assessor at the time was that his observation is that people like me, they have a certain advantage. I mean, it's still not a guarantee, but an advantage with the skills they bring to the table when it then comes to negotiate or be in tough negotiations. Of course, this is not the only skill you need to bring to the table, but it is an important foundation. And I know many people that now want to go into that field. They choose international development studies, which definitely is a good thing to choose. However, I would encourage everyone who chooses a bit less usual or less orthodox path, as I am deeply convinced that you can thrive.
And you have mentioned in several places also the importance of transdisciplinarity and also learning to unlearn. I'm curious, do you still read a lot of fiction?
I still read. This is what I prefer to do, read fiction. A lot, unfortunately, not that much because of time that lacks. But if I read, yes, it's mostly fiction.
And then how did diplomacy emerge as an option, even in your life? Guide me a bit through that process of starting to work and the experiences that most impact you, perhaps.
I was told already when growing up, oh, you should become a diplomat. And I always said no.
You were told by your family?
By my family. And I said no. And
were you the diplomat in the family?
Yes, I was the third child in the family. So I think that was also one of the reasons. And I always tried to build the bridges, which has advantages, but sometimes also disadvantages. So I didn't think of becoming a diplomat until maybe the age of 26. What was it? I think, yes, I started at the age of 27, I started to seriously consider this. At the time, I was working as a teacher, but also working as a journalist and working as a travel guide. And I think this combination somehow, led me to thinking about that. And then I was in Russia, and I was working in Russia. This was still during my university studies, but I had the fantastic opportunity to do an internship at the Voice of Russia, the Radio Voice of Russia in Moscow. And I was working there for the German service. And as the only Swiss, I then was basically, whenever a Swiss person came, be it the famous chef or a minister, so a representative of the Swiss government, it was always me going there and doing interviews or reporting about that, because there was no other Swiss in this radio. So that was fantastic. And at the time, whenever some Swiss personality came in an official mission to Russia, that was during the 90s, mm-hmm. It always had to go somehow through the Swiss embassy. So this is where I somehow discovered what the diplomats are doing there, and I started to be interested in it. Then I ordered the documentation to see what the requirements are for the exam. I put that immediately after reading it into a bin, because I said, I'm never, ever going to pass this exam. I mean, I simply won't. And that was it. That was back in 1997, 98. So I just buried that. That was it. And I thought I would pursue more a career as a journalist. While already at the time being interested in international development cooperation. And then I started to work in a small press agency, which was specialized at the time on topics of international development cooperation. So we were selling articles to Swiss newspapers on topics related to international development cooperation. And while it was really a good school I went through there, I realized that print journalism is not... I loved the work at the radio, and being a more print journalist wasn't so much my thing. And I just knew, okay, I'll need to give myself another perspective. And thus I ordered again the documentation to see how to prepare myself for the exam. And I said, okay, let's try it. Whatever I learn is worthwhile, even if I don't pass it. It's not lost. So I went with that attitude into the whole process, and was really surprised that I passed the written exam. This was a huge surprise to me, because some of the questions I had to answer, I had no clue what the question was about. So sometimes I just closed my eyes and made a cross somewhere. However, then when I was invited to the oral exams, which was the second stage, there I was much more confident. And I just said, either they like me, they take me, or someone else is somehow suits better what they're looking for. Yeah, that was how I got into it.
Mm-hmm. Let me get a better sense. This is an exam that people need to do in order to enter the diplomacy field?
You need to have a university degree. Mm-hmm. And then you still need to pass an exam. So first you have to apply, and then you need to be selected for the exams, and then you have to pass an exam or several exams, and then you're selected to undergo a training of either, right now I don't know how long it is, either 1 or 2 years. And then at the end of this training, you have a final exam, and then only you're really entering the service, diplomatic service.
And your career starts... I see here that you also moved around quite a lot, which makes sense as a diplomat. Do you recall connecting with the younger Tatjana navigating these first experiences as a trainee, and then slowly, not slowly, actually quite in sequence, getting more and more responsibility. Do you recall what were some of your challenges, or what were you sitting with at that time when it comes to your professional life? Which could be both in external, at the external level, or internal.
Yeah, of course, there were many challenges to overcome, and with which I was confronted with. It starts with, you're thrown as a diplomat, and I mentioned it. I wasn't a lawyer, and I wasn't an economist. So the first job I had was in the environment unit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a trainee. But I wasn't a specialist at all. So the challenge is to deal with things you have no clue about. You don't know anything. And at the same time, you have to quickly, without bluffing too much, you have to quickly somehow absorb the essence of what you deal with, in order then to also represent your country in the end. But this challenge was met with the excitement and curiosity I mentioned before, of discovering, learning new things, and discovering also what is diplomacy about, what's the essence of it. It's a real game. You have to like playing very much if you move towards multilateral diplomacy. It's a real game. So it's not the fake game. It's you. So it comes again with the responsibility, the sense of responsibility to play that role well and honestly and decently, with respect towards the others. There are challenges, when you choose such a career path. It's difficult to completely separate the private and the professional life. That's another challenge. So you move around, you leave your friends and family back home, and you have all these exciting experiences abroad, but they mark you, they don't mark your closest back home. And then when you have, for example, a health issue, a personal health issue, this is when you realize how important also this nest of a family and close friends you grew up with is, and how do you construct in that? This is for me challenge that continues over the years, and where you really also have to be very aware of what it does with you as a person. And of course, there are many other challenges. Another challenge is, when you're someone like me coming from a country where, for many others looking at our country, they think the honey just flows on the streets, which of course is not true. Still, for us, certain things are just a given, and but we can't assume that the way we function here, this functions elsewhere. But that's another challenge at different levels. One is that you really have to constantly ensure that while you come with your values and you stand by these values, you still don't assume how things should work. And then also acknowledge that, especially when it touches you personally, that help you might think that is needed is not necessarily the best help. And when I'm saying that, I refer to many people that live in countries where they have huge governance issues and other challenges. And the basic needs are not fulfilled in terms of, so access to basic needs is not ensured. And it's still not up to me to tell these, to then say, okay, I'll do my charity, I change something in your life. It is up to me to see how, through my presence and with the resources I bring with, I could empower these people to make their own decisions equally to how I want to make my own decisions.
And was this always obvious to you, or this was a conclusion that crystallized at some point or throughout time?
It wasn't obvious to me. No, or I wasn't that conscious. I think it was a conclusion that crystallized over time. However, and that's maybe related also to the shy person I also have in my, or I'm carrying with me. I think my advantage is that, given that when I'm feeling insecure, I first listen. And that can help.
In making less assumptions and being more present and reading the room. I couldn't let you go without asking you a bit about your experience negotiating the SDGs, representing Switzerland. And I'm going to grab also in that you said of the shyness. I'm curious to explore that. I'm just, when I put myself in your shoes, I'm just so interested in knowing how was it for you to navigate this experience and to deal with such high pressure when the stakes are so high.
Well, first of all, I wasn't alone. I was representing a country, but again, not just me representing the country. This was an entire team. So I was part of a team consisting of people that were based in Switzerland and led and coordinated the entire process of building the Swiss position in Switzerland. And me as an extended member of that team, being the one who led then a smaller team at the Swiss mission to the UN in New York that was following the various discussions and negotiations that took place. Because it's when you negotiate something like the SDGs, it's not just this formal track that has to be followed. There have been so many other tracks which played into that track and which made the SDGs what they are today. So, and I'm someone who likes this global multilateral games, trying to understand where others come from and what their or their country's national positions, motivation is. That's one thing, but then also how they deal with that. All these elements, I think they were detrimental for me to, as you were asking, to somehow also deal with the pressure that one assumes that comes with, such a function.
Well, did you feel the pressure?
Of course, I felt the pressure. However, it's important. You're representing a country. My privilege was that the country I was representing and the positions, the Swiss positions, they were not contrary to what I was believing or strongly believing in. This, for me, was very, very important. if I would have had to represent values I can't stand behind, then it's a very different pressure. And yes, there were nights, when you're really, you don't know what to do or how to do it, because you have to negotiate through the night, and you can't. The people at home, they are asleep, so you can't call them. You need to live with it, in always also knowing that this is the best thing that can happen, is that the outcome is really good for the society and is really a positive contribution, and therefore purposeful. But you have to distinguish this from your personal life. That's so you really you put a lot of energy into these negotiations and discussions. You have to ensure that you have in your office also the backing, be it from your superiors, but also from your team. These are the things that then help you deal with certain pressures that come and are exerted, and then you just. I think it's more an inner stance that needs to be exercised in order that when it becomes really tough, that you have this automatic reflex, either to say, okay, now I just need to call someone, or I need to turn to someone to whom I trust, as sometimes these negotiations can become very nasty.
Okay, so now, beginning to wrap up, there's so much still to ask, but we don't have time and limited time. You mentioned, this skill of playing the game, not only in this experience that you were just describing, but overall throughout your career and life. What have you learned about this importance of the mediating and understanding people's intentions and motivations? What do you think is the role of that skill in shaping our future?
The role of that skill is providing or using it to help shape these safe spaces. That's one thing I see also as I also in my function today. I think this is an important element. As today and for the future, we really collectively have to think about how do we work, and we have to have a very deep reflection on the how. We have been all shaped and trained in terms of and conditioned of how we should do a certain thing. And these hows are highly questioned, because these hows, they might have worked in the last century, but they don't work in this century. And when I say using that skill to provide these spaces, I mean that also with the experience I bring and the confidence that if you create that space, this redefinition of the how can take place, because you provide space for people to speak that maybe don't speak because they don't have the power, respectively, the resources to have access to these spaces. So this is where I see my responsibility, given the skills that I could also, I learned and I trained and I deployed. One thing that is really dear to me is, and I don't want to be misunderstood, for me, playing is not something that works if you're not authentic. So the real game, I mean, if you play a card game, then you can trick others. But if you want to deploy that skill you have to be very, very authentic, and you have to stand, and this has to be felt that you stand to the values you preach. Otherwise, this skill doesn't help you because people won't trust you.
Which it's coming to my mind now that in a way that could be comparable to fiction and literature, because while you're playing, with this, with imagination, you're playing with the imagination and the characters that you have, but for something true. And if that's something true, fundamentally true about human nature and what we're collectively dealing with and facing, then the book also feels inauthentic. And the books that are, I think, most appreciated are also those that speak to that truth and authenticity of the existence.
Yeah, that's very nicely said, yes.
I want to ask you, looking a bit also at the current state of the world, that only 15% of the goals that were defined for the SDGs are on track. 2023 was also the hottest year ever since we're taking note. How do you sit with this? And also, I think in these conversations about climate and ecological collapse or crisis, there seems to be somewhat of a spectrum that goes from doom to hope. And I would like to know how you sit with this and where do you stand in this conversation?
2030 agenda and the SDGs, they have been adopted on the 25th of September 2015. This was a moment where the international community agreed on a framework for the future and a positive vision. That's a positive statement, and it's a positive way to see how we navigate in this world, which is a complex world, and it gives us this framework. On the 26th of September 2015, we had the Russian troops that went into Aleppo in Syria. And I'm using this example quite often because I want to show that let's not be naive. If you come up with a vision, a positive vision, that doesn't mean that this is the only truth. There are other people that see the world more through the lenses of what has happened and how the answers given on the 26th of September and many other days in the past years and decades. And I'm saying that as I think it's much more rewarding to be on this side of the coin of the 25th of September than on the other side of the coin. For me, this is what I want to pursue with others. I thrive with the positive energy that I get in working collectively with people that believe that there is a future, that believe that haven't lost hope. They might not be optimistic, yes, which is realistic, but they are hopeful. And I'm just coming back from Kenya, where I was 2 weeks ago with our first cohort of change makers from 3 different countries that met then for the first time after they ran through this 6-month program. And they met in Kenya, and we, as one partner in this 3-apartheid partnership with Mzingo and Goodwill together. So these change makers, they were brought to northern Kenya, where the Visa Academy has one of its regional stewardship hubs. And just seeing the dynamic that has been generated through a structure that we provided together with our partners, Goodwill and Mzingo, to these young people that wanted to work on their skills that allow them then to be better equipped to drive the change they want to see in their own community. Having this group of individuals together, having grown to a collective, but then also being challenged by us in working on some of the challenges that we as the Visa Academy see and work on in northern Kenya with other partners, and then seeing the solutions they came up with. This is hope. And this is hope because this shows that if you bring together the right people with a determination to be part of the change, but with very different skills and very different experiences, and then you deploy these skills and the experiences and allow them to collectively see how they can make a difference, because bringing together these different experiences in the sum is much more than if you would deploy them individually. That's where I draw from my hope and also in the end, and again, some optimism.
And our last question is, if you could speak across time now, and I'm going to make here a variation of this question, which is maybe, I don't know, a conversation you have with your daughters. What words of advice or wisdom would you like to receive if you are now in your 20s, about to start your professional life with the way things are? What would you like to hear?
I would give them the advice to try to always sustain a level of self-determination, because we are all part of a system. We have to adapt to that system. We have to integrate into structures. That doesn't mean that we should become prisoners of these structures. And this level of self-determination that helps me to ensure that I stay true to my values. I think this is very powerful, as it helps you then also to overcome difficult times when things don't work as you wish they should.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tatjana.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
For your interest. Ciao.
Yeah. Ciao, Tatjana. Thank you. Tatjana von Steiger is the head of policy outreach at the Visa Academy for Nature. You can learn more about her work in the description of this episode. Waking Youth is a project that you can find more about at wakingyouth.substack.com, where I also share thought pieces that accompany the podcast. Our theme music is composed and produced by Carlos Sierra, who also edits our episodes, and I'm Carlota Guedes. Before you go, and because sometimes things do get lonely on this side, I invite you to leave us your feedback or comments. What did you like about this episode? What would you like to see us do more of? Let us know at carlota@wakingyouth.org. Thank you for being here with us, and talk to you soon. Ciao!